Blake Shelton makes headlines today for a simple moment that touched millions. In a world where headlines are often driven by controversy, noise, and spectacle, it takes something truly genuine to stop people in their tracks. Today, Blake Shelton is making headlines not because of a chart-topping song or a major announcement, but because of a simple moment that quietly reached millions of hearts. The moment itself was not planned. There was no stage, no spotlight, and no script. It happened naturally, in a public setting where Blake Shelton was moving through his day like anyone else. What followed was brief, almost ordinary at first glance, yet powerful enough to spark conversations across social media within hours. Witnesses say Blake Shelton noticed a fan standing nearby, hesitant and unsure whether to approach. Instead of continuing forward, he slowed down. That pause, unremarkable to some, became the heart of the story. He turned his attention fully toward the person in front of him. There was no rush, no visible distraction, no sense that this interaction was something to get through quickly. It was calm, respectful, human. In an age where celebrities are often shielded by schedules and security, moments like this feel rare. Fans are used to quick waves, distant smiles, and brief acknowledgments. What made this moment different was presence. Blake Shelton did not simply acknowledge the fan, he engaged. Those nearby sensed it instantly. The energy shifted. Phones came out, not because something dramatic was unfolding, but because something sincere was happening. The interaction lasted only a short time, yet it felt meaningful in a way that lingered. When the footage began circulating online, reactions poured in almost immediately. Fans shared the clips with captions describing the moment as real, pure, and unexpectedly emotional. Many commented that this was exactly why they admired Blake Shelton in the first place. What struck people most was the simplicity of the act. There was no grand gesture, no public speech, no attempt to turn the moment into content. It was just time, attention, and kindness, things that feel increasingly rare in public life. As the story spread, it resonated far beyond Blake Shelton's fan base. People who didn't follow his music or career found themselves stopping to watch. The moment didn't require context. Anyone could understand it. Comment sections filled with reflections. Some shared personal stories of meeting celebrities and feeling invisible. Others shared memories of small acts of kindness that had stayed with them for years. Blake Shelton's name became connected to a larger conversation about empathy and presence. Media outlets began picking up the story, framing it not as celebrity gossip, but as a reminder of something deeper. Analysts noted that moments like this cut through the noise because they are not trying to impress. They simply exist. Blake Shelton himself remained quiet. There were no posts, no captions, no statements explaining what happened. That silence only strengthened the response. It made the moment feel untouched and authentic. Longtime fans were not surprised. Over the years, Blake Shelton has often been described as grounded and approachable. Interviews and behind-the-scenes stories frequently highlight his comfort with people and his lack of pretense. This moment felt like a continuation of that reputation rather than a departure from it. For newer audiences, however, it served as an introduction, not to his music, but to his character. As the day went on, the story continued to grow. It wasn't dominating feeds through shock or controversy, but through warmth. In a digital space often filled with anger and division, this quiet moment stood out by offering something rare: reassurance. Blake Shelton made headlines today not by demanding attention, but by giving it. And in doing so, he reminded millions that sometimes the smallest moments leave the biggest impact. As the story continued to travel across platforms, something unusual happened. Instead of fading quickly, the moment gained depth. People didn't just watch and move on. They paused. They rewatched. They shared it with commentary that felt personal rather than performative. For many viewers, the moment struck a nerve because it reflected something they longed for in their own lives: being noticed, being heard, being treated with patience. Blake Shelton's quiet interaction became symbolic of those needs, even though it was never intended to represent anything larger. Fans from different countries began responding, proving that the impact wasn't limited by geography or culture. Messages poured in describing how the clip had changed someone's mood for the day, or reminded them of a time when a stranger's kindness made a difference. Blake Shelton's name appeared again and again, attached not to fame, but to feeling. Entertainment journalists observed that this type of story has a different rhythm. It doesn't explode and vanish, it settles. It becomes something people return to when they want a reminder that decency still exists in public life. What made the moment even more powerful was the lack of explanation. Blake Shelton did not step forward to clarify, narrate, or frame the event. By allowing it to stand on its own, he preserved its honesty. There was no sense that the moment had been crafted for perception. It remained what it was, a human exchange. Industry voices quietly acknowledged how rare this has become. In a time when every public action is often filtered through strategy, the absence of strategy feels refreshing. It signals confidence, comfort, and authenticity. The conversation slowly expanded beyond Blake Shelton himself. People began discussing the idea that kindness does not need scale to matter, that influence can exist in small spaces, that attention, when offered sincerely, can outweigh any grand gesture. For Blake Shelton's longtime supporters, this moment felt like confirmation rather than surprise. It aligned with the values he has often expressed in interviews and reflected the grounded tone that has followed him throughout his career. This was not a new image, it was a familiar one, simply captured at the right time. As days passed and new headlines replaced old ones, this story did not disappear completely. It resurfaced quietly in comments, recommendations, and conversations, not because it demanded to be remembered, but because people wanted to remember it. There was no lesson announced, no message delivered directly, yet the meaning was clear. Kindness does not need to be loud, respect does not need an audience, and humanity does not lose its value in the presence of fame. Blake Shelton made headlines today for a simple moment, but its effect stretched far beyond the day itself. It reminded millions that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that unfold without intention, without performance, and without noise. And in a world that rarely slows down, that reminder mattered.